Now, when it comes to building your AR, guys, right, you're looking at your perfect loadout, you're looking for your perfect attachment, and you come across the barrel attachment. You have basically your main two options. You're either going to choose the long range barrel attachment or the gain twist, because those are the maximum, whether you want to focus on damage range or bullet velocity. And that's the question that I want to pose in the video today. When you're building these ARs, what is better to prioritize? Bullet velocity or damage range? In my opinion, I'm going to throw it out there, there's no point in trying to focus both, where you're trying to use the reinforced barrel that benefits both stats. You know, they have that saying, right? Jack of all trades, master of none. I'd rather be the master of one so that it benefits me in my gunfights. But first, let me kind of define what these stats do, right? So let's talk about damage range. So we have the GPR 91 build. We currently have the gain twist barrel. Let's talk about damage range. Now, what the damage range specifically is right here, this stat at the bottom, damage at effective range, 38.1 meters. So that means anything 38.1 meters and below, which is closer to me as a target, is going to be having a 40 damage per shot. What damage range specifically does is it increases that 38 meter threshold. So if I were to take off the gain twist barrel and put in the long barrel attachment, now instead of my damage range being at 38.1 meters for 40 damage per shot, it's going to be at 53 meters to have 40 damage per shot. So what that means is now I can take my shots past 38 meters and it would still have the maximum damage output rather than minimum. But let's apply that into a real life scenario, right? We're playing big BR. Now you're fighting people at 10 meters, 25 meters. Are you really fighting people at 50 meters? Maybe in some situations. So if you think about it, having your damage range extend all the way to 58 meters, that's farther than this third round dummy. That's going to be a rare occasion. Most times you're going to be taking your gunfights 50 meters and below. So if you know you're taking gunfights to targets at 50 meters and below, which is closer to you, there is no point trying to do a long range damage barrel to benefit you in these fights. I'd rather have another barrel like the gain twist barrel, which gives you 40% additional bullet velocity, and we'll get into the bullet velocity later. And then the same thing applies to resurgence, where you're taking majority of your fights from 30 to 40 meters at most. So now let's move on to bullet velocity, right? What does bullet velocity do? Bullet velocity is essentially the time it takes from that bullet to leave the barrel of your gun to hit the target that you are looking at. So when you read these bullet velocity attachment stats on these weapons right here for the GPR 91, you're looking at 1753. Let's just round it up, 1750 meters a second. So what that means is for that bullet to travel 1750 meters, it is going to take 1 full second. So when you have a higher bullet velocity, the bullet travels faster. Lower bullet velocity, the bullet travels slower. The bullet takes longer to get to the target. All right, so let's say for example's sake, right, this GPR 91 has 1800 meters per second in regards to bullet velocity. So what that means is if I'm shooting a target that is 10 meters in front of me, you take 10 meters, divide that up by 1800. That comes down to 0.006, aka 6 milliseconds, right? Because if it takes a full second for it to reach 1800 meters, for the bullet to reach 10 meters, it's going to be so much more quicker. Less than a second, less than half a second. You're talking about 6 milliseconds. Just to put that in perspective, it takes 1000 milliseconds to reach 1 second. That's why when you go into matches like Resurgence, right, a lot of players don't really need to rely on bullet velocity attachments. Why? Because a lot of their gunfights are within 10 to 25 meters. They don't need to have that bullet velocity. They can focus on other attachments like damage range, like recoil, all of that. Then when you're trying to shoot a target at 25 meters with a 1800 meters a second bullet velocity, you're looking about 25 milliseconds for this bullet to reach this target. You must be thinking, okay, cool, Noble, you're just spouting out numbers. How are these numbers, knowing these numbers, going to help benefit me in the fight, right? So I said it takes 25 milliseconds to reach this target. That's with a situation where you have 0 millisecond latency. Now, you need to add the time it takes for the bullet to register on the target, aka matching and adding your server latency. So for example's sake, if your current match, your connection is at 50 milliseconds, right? And it takes about 14 milliseconds to reach to this target. It doesn't take 14 milliseconds anymore. 50 plus 14, it takes 64 milliseconds. Now those milliseconds shouldn't really matter on a stationary target, right? They're standing still, they're not moving. But what if they're strafing left or right? What if they're running across the map? Now you have to calculate the time it takes for your shot to hit them on a moving target, aka that's when players talk about leading your shots. This is why I want to take a very extreme example. A lot of people like the growl, right? Very good iron sight, very good easy on the recoil control, but it's very low on bullet velocity. You're looking at 1200 meters a second compared to 1800 like the GPR91. So to calculate the bullet velocity, right, for a growl to hit a target at 25 meters, instead of it being 14 milliseconds, it is now 21 milliseconds. Now you add that additional 50 millisecond connection to your lobby. Now that is 71 milliseconds. That's why some players get so confused. They're saying, you know, oh, I'm aiming on the target. I'm putting my scopes right on the target. Why is my bullets barely registering? Is because they're not calculating the time it takes for your bullets to register onto the server after shooting the weapon, as well as how much they should lead their shot. So you take this target dummy, right? Imagine this target dummy being at a far one, like 50 meters, okay? If you had a 75-second delay, right? If you were to shoot chest while the target is running right, you're going to shoot chest, the 75-second delay is probably going to have your bullet register maybe to the right of his arm because he's moving right. So that means he's moving in this direction at the same time. By the time this bullet reaches this target at 50 meters, it might hit to the left of him rather than right on the chest because he's moving. That's why players need to lead their shots, right? If this target at 50 meters is running to the right, you need to kind of shoot slightly ahead of him. That way your shots, eventually with that 75 millisecond delay, is going to land on their chest. It is not going to miss, it is always going to hit. There are some people who will try to shoot a moving target and try to hit the chest, not realizing that with the delay, they're probably hitting their arm or they're just missing them to the left of them. That's why when you take a gun like the GPR91, you don't have to lead your shot so much because the bullet velocity is higher. Maybe for the growl, in order to compensate for that long delay on the bullet traveling, they'd have to shoot maybe 1 foot out from the moving target, that way it lands on them. While something like the growl, because of the high bullet velocity, you don't have to stick your aim out or you don't have to lead your shot so much. You can actually go a little bit closer and it would still land on target. Why? Because the bullet is traveling faster. So in my honest opinion, guys, every time that I build my AR loadouts, I don't go for damage range. I go for bullet velocity instead. Because what's the point of having a longer damage range, right? Oh, you know what? I can take down a player a lot more farther. But the thing is, if you're going to have a harder time trying to gauge your shot, because you're trying to lead your shot more because you have low bullet velocity, that is going to be a higher chance of you missing your shots. I'd rather have a shorter damage range because realistically that's where I'm fighting, right? And not have to lead my shot so much, not have to think about leading my shot so much, and have my weapons laser exactly where I'm aiming. Try it out for yourself, guys, right? Take off all the bullet velocity attachments on your weapon, have that weapon have the lowest bullet velocity, and then compare it to having the same build but do full bullet velocity. You're gonna realize how much less you have to lead your shots. But yeah, that's my take on damage range and bullet velocity. Which one is better, which is more ideal? What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. And if you did enjoy the video, please drop a like on the video. It helps it tremendously in the algorithm. And if you did enjoy the content overall, drop a sub to the channel. We'd love to see you here for the next video, okay? As always, stay pure, stay noble, and hashtag bring back honest gaming. Noble out.